Well, so after soldering everything up, it was working exactly as before. So I went ahead and added in the last mouse feature that hadn't been put in here. I also added the oxygen comments for uh, the Python script, which is similar but slightly uh, different comment notation, obviously. So 2 hash marks, pound signs, whatever you want to call that symbol. 2 of those start the oxygen commentation, and then each subsequent line needs to start with a single one. And the way Python, it's getting internal to Python, the sort of thing most people never think about. But remember, every Python script is a namespace collection of objects. So when we want to refer to the script, a Python script in the page, we have to say @package because it is every Python script is a namespace collection of objects. Some of the background stuff we normally don't think about. Then just a description like we were doing before. And for single line variables, on the line before the variable, just put the oxygen comment. So there's a Boolean for the keyboard and avoid spamming the buttons. And for the last feature, I still had to get the drag selection going. So I set up a Boolean to tell whether that's happening or not. Because the drag's a little bit different. On all our clicks, we can just check that click. But for dragging, we need the change from the mouse down to the mouse up. So I set up a Boolean to keep track of that change and then where it started and ended. Everything else is still like it was, just added in the oxygen comments. And for a function, just 2 lines to signal to the oxygen to start. And each line starts with one of the symbols, and then just describe the function right beforehand. We'll take a look at that documentation in a moment. And the final thing here, I'll pause here for a second. I don't remember if we paused or not. To avoid spamming buttons, I put in a variable just to keep the Unix epoch time of the last mouse click and made sure it's been more than 150 milliseconds just to avoid spamming the clicks because the frame rate's going kind of quick here. So box select using those global variables I set up, and it just asks for the state of the D button. So if the button is pressed and that Boolean is false, so that means the first time the button gets pressed, we grab the position, the XY position where we started at, and then change that Boolean to true. And then when the button is released, that Boolean changes again, and then we grab the ending position and then go back to the starting position and drag to the moving position with the left button down. It doesn't highlight along the way. I'm going to have to figure out something to put in there to highlight along the way. It kind of start, and then whenever you release the button, it highlights everything. Everything else is like it was, so let's do a quick run on this. I'll just run it in the interpreter. Let the microcontroller boot up. It's plugged up using the new the prototype soldered into the PCB, and the mouse still moving like it was. I guess I can come over here. So left click, right click. Middle click doesn't do anything here. The screen recorder should be showing the circle, but it's set up exactly like the other ones. Scrolling still working the same. And then to select it, where's something to select? I'll use this new one. Using the D button, I just pick a starting point. Pick a starting point, hold down the D button, and you notice it doesn't highlight it. When I let go, it'll highlight everything in between. So the drag select is working now. So that's all the mouse features. And doing that kind of gave me a good feel for the controller and what the numbers in the code need to say, which will make, and the exit condition still works, which should make it a little easier when we get over to a more complicated game, having practiced a little with the numbers coming from the controller first and kind of gotten used to them in an easier situation. So now we're ready to start putting games together. But let's go ahead and update the Doxygen comments to have all the documentation for this up and ready. And doing that is exactly like we've seen already. So I have everything saved here in the Scratch folder. I'll just open the Doxy file. The only change I made is I've started ignoring that generic look for inputs and going over to the expert tab and manually setting the input source for each one. So every folder that has a file to search, I'm just going to add that folder in one at a time to this list. Just paste the directory in there and click the add button until all of them are there. And if we look at the file patterns, Python should already be on here. Oh, there it is, .py files. So it should recognize a Python file. Looking in the right folder now. So if I come over to run, I'll run this. And I'll just go all the way through the documentation here because that's the last thing in this video. And it looks like we're only about 6 minutes in, so still a short video. So in the documentation, here's our index page. And it's just a good idea to work on this along the way because you don't want to get stuck with all boring stuff when the fun stuff's done. Could probably take a real picture now instead of that one, but all the CAD dimensions and everything were exactly right, so the real picture will look exactly like that one. So I'm in no hurry to change the picture over. Maybe come up with a better description. In the instruction panel, I need to add those last instructions, which is just some HTML code. So I'll open this with Notepad++. Find where those instructions are. There it is. Add that in and just keep up with it along the way. That way it doesn't become an overwhelming project at the end. To drag a box select, hold the D button while dragging around the XY axis joystick. Will not highlight until the selection is completed. Hopefully I'll be able to get that fixed before too long and figure out how to make it highlight along the way, but when I tried, it kept jumping back. I tried to do it every loop through and it was constantly jumping back and it looked like a strobe light flashing. So I was like, yeah, I'll just wait till the end to highlight and see if I can come up with something else later for that. So that, I saved it, reload that. So now all our instructions are in, and it just prevent that from getting out of hand, being too much of an overwhelming task at the end. Then our schematics, the wiring diagram, the PCB board, an isometric exploded view from the CAD files, and then the code reference opens in another tab. So if we go to the class tabs, all we have is the C++ class. I guess to organize it, I could put that into a namespace in C++ because the Python will only show up in the namespace one. And here's all our reference for the mouse controls. Just that other notation, 2 hashtags to signify Doxygen to start, and then each line needs to start with 1. And for the single line comments, it can fit in one line right before the variable. And then same thing on the functions, just put it right before the functions. And that brings it right in here. So now you can see the documentation is coming along. I can close out of this. And it appears that everything is working like it should. I'll go ahead and bring this up and just for a check, close out of everything on my screen here. Oh, we still haven't seen this. So the keyboard still works. I can type L, K, J, maybe a couple backspaces, and then flip the switch, which is easily accessed by my fingers the way it is on the controller. Come over here, hit the save button, close out of this, then the exit condition. So everything's working. So that'll finish up this video, and in the next video we'll get started putting a game together. I may put a tutorial together while making the games on a different playlist. So on this playlist, the next video will have the games at least partially completed, ready for the controller.